Go Big 12 or go home live. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined as always by Midwest broadcasting legend Drew Russell, repping the Gophers. Live show because we can't wait. We got Big 12 games tonight that we
Yes.
needed to talk about. So it felt very icky to, cut up a game of us previewing Colorado, North Dakota State, and then just taping out like hours after
Yeah.
it's airing. But we got football games here. Colorado kicks off here at the top of the hour, so any minute now. UCF is in a dogfight somehow. That's another big one. Your Hogs are playing. They're
Ooh,
giving
big
it
tonight,
to.
Brandon.
Yeah, they're
Fifty
giving it to
point
them.
favorites. We're gonna take it to Pine Bluff tonight. I can
Are
feel
they
it.
really 50-point favorites?
50-point favorites. If they lose tonight, Sam Pittman's gonna be fired. I'll go
What?
that crazy right now.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. Likely that they're in a good spot. They just went up 14-0. That that's 30 more points on the point spread than defending national champion Michigan hosting Fresno State. Put that in
That's
perspective.
maybe Arkansas is just better than Michigan this year. Maybe we just never thought of that, Brandon.
More than four more touchdowns. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Also,
unbelievable.
also Pine Bluff is bad. I'll
Pine
put that
Bluff is
flat.
bad. Fresno State's not very good either, and Michigan just won a national championship. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Brandon. Right now, this is an interesting college football season. Big 12 football is going to be crazy this year. And I'll promise our listeners out there, too. Brandon and I will try to have some Big 12 gear on for next week's show. We want to apologize right now. We're just repping Midwest schools out of a different conference, but we're gonna be repping Big 12 schools next week. I can guarantee I'll be in Iowa State gear because that's Cyhawk week. So
Oh
you
yeah. Oh,
you can count
absolutely.
on that right now, ladies and gentlemen. That's guaranteed.
Without a doubt. Oh my gosh. Oh, Cyhawk Week's next week. I love
Can't
it.
be beat. Can't be beat. RVTV is a famous, WHO 13 if you're in the Des Moines metro area. They're doing their little tour next week. They're going through our old stomping grounds, Brandon. Brandon and I worked radio in Perry, Iowa. So Big Red Radio, I'm sure will be live on location. So, but Cyhawks next week, Brandon, and it's on CBS 2:30. We got the CBS 2:30 spot for the
Oh my
Cyhawk
gosh.
game.
Big
I
Ten on
can't wait.
CBS, just how it's supposed to be.
You dream about it. I mean, you can. And the SEC is going to be on ABC now, which is going to be a major adjustment for many older viewers in the United States. Like especially the ones in the South, they're going to be very upset. That'll take them probably 20 minutes to figure out that it's not the SEC on CBS anymore.
What if they just don't realize it? Like, oh, I mean, I hear rumblings about all the realignment. Maybe Iowa and Iowa State are now in the SEC.
Could be. You're right, Brandon. Maybe there'll be a stunning moniker that says, SEC on CBS next week. Oh, I must have missed that realignment news. Anything can happen in college athletics, and we're
I'll tell you,
seeing, and it really can.
I'll tell you what. I'm sure Iowa State would appreciate having that fourth non-conference game in November.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it? That'd be nice for bowl eligibility. Playoff. That'd be kind of nice to have just maybe a potential another freebie win, just to look like it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really caking up the schedule, and I mean that's win for Iowa State if they can get Austin P in November as opposed to Utah or Kansas State or Kansas or I mean league games in November. That's a tough slate. So I'm sure they would appreciate the vacation there.
Hey, the SEC. There's nobody like the SEC. They just do it right, right?
It just means more, is what I'm
Just
told.
means more. Best commercial on earth. Let's go to Gulf Shores, Alabama, Brandon. Let's recreate that commercial.
I love it, but I mean, with the way realignment's going, I wouldn't surprise me. But some realignment news with the Big 12, UConn. Lots of movement there with UConn coming to the Peg 12. Back-to-back national champion UConns. They wouldn't be a football member until the next decade, and then basketball member, I think, as soon as 2026. But some big news coming out of the Big 12, even still.
Surprising a little bit because UConn they pretty much sacrificed their football program a few years ago just to get back into the Big East, really to save their basketball program. That was the reason. They're like, well, our men's basketball program isn't any good now in the AAC. Sacrifice the football program. The move worked out great for UConn hoops, back-to-back national championships. but they want money. And I think they want an opportunity for their football program to be competitive again. For Big 12 hoops, what a get if this actually does go through. In terms of college athletics itself, it doesn't really excite me because, admittingly, UConn is a Big East school. That is their history. They're famous in the Big East, but you got to survive in this in the jungle out there, Brandon, and that's what they're trying to do right now. But it'd be a great get for Brett Yormark. Clearly obsessed with building the best basketball conference in the nation. You get UConn, especially where they're at right now. I don't think there's much debate. Big 12's best basketball conference in the nation right now. But boy, if he really wants to definitely make sure, there you go.
I mean, really doubling down on it. I mean, looking at it from a football aspect, it doesn't. I'm not a huge fan. I think it's nice to wait until the next TV contract. Maybe that helps things. I mean, once you're going to be in a better spot like UConn, maybe that can help. And then getting them some extra revenue to kind of build things up, that would be nice. And then get the basketball impact right away. I think that's huge. So you're basically getting them at a discount, and then bolstering up the basketball brand. I don't. The more I think about it, the more on board I am with it.
Yeah.
I still think there are more better partners that I'd like to have. I'd like to, rummage through the ACC once that inevitably collapse. So I don't want to, I don't want Yormark to like overcommit on something and be like, oh well, now we got 30 teams, and now we're trying to find a way to add Louisville and NC State, who by the way is in a dogfight with West Carolina.
What's the score of that?
So West Carolina just went up 6-0. Shout out friend of the channel, Brooke Byrne. He's been real big on Grayson McCall this year at NC State, and so he threw the interception that led to the touchdown. So had to shoot him a message, just a quick little Grayson McCrook. Is that?
Oh no, no, Brandon, what are you doing? Hey, it's gonna be okay. McCall's got this.
I think it's gonna be just fine here. But I mean, we're just a few minutes away from Colorado here. But any final thoughts on UConn to the Big 12?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Brandon, it'll be interesting to see how the Big 12 continues to build their basketball brand, because I think Brett Yormark is aware, and there's no other way to put it. SEC and Big 10 have got them beat in terms of football traditional powerhouses and potential revenue built within that. Doesn't mean Big 12 football can't get to that level eventually, but they've got work to do, and he's aware of that. I think it's a very safe bet to continue to invest in the basketball side of the league. You can make a lot of money through March Madness, obviously revenue that comes into the conference through wins there. And it's pretty marketable. You get UConn, all of a sudden you're looking at a coast-to-coast conference where, I mean, they get UConn. You talk about potentially the ACC, and who knows how that breaks down. You can't tell me those Carolina schools all of a sudden don't want in the Big 12 just to be in a conference of powerhouses. And how big does that conference be built? There's a lot of questions, but I shouldn't be shocked by the news, but I am, just because of the history UConn has with the Big East. But this is college athletics in the 2020s.
I'll tell you what I am surprised about. I'm surprised about the speed at which this is moving, because we're not going to get any resolution with what's going on in the ACC for at least a long time, at least a while. And then you're kind of looking at it from a sense of I kind of just figured that at this point in the season that we would just kind of sit tight and figure out what was going on there. So to see something like UConn officials in Dallas working with Brett Yormark to get something going, that's impressive. That caught me off guard quite a bit. Is at the speed that it's moving.
It is, but you have to move at that speed, though, Brandon. You have to. If you don't, it's too late. And you look at how quickly things can change. So they don't really have any choice, and that's why Brent Yormark could go down. I think might go down already as the best commissioner in conference history, just because of his proactive approach to keeping this league alive, getting money for the member schools, and keeping everybody happy. But again, things can change on a dime. This is positive news to the Big 12, but who knows where we're at in certain months, years, etc. You have to be proactive, though.
I'll push back a little bit. I don't know if you have to be proactive about UConn. I don't think that there's a whole lot of buyers for the Huskies, unfortunately.
I'll tell you this, Brendan. How about a conference game where you've got UConn going all the way down to Tucson, Arizona, or Phoenix, Arizona to play Arizona State? Like they're turning it. That's the ACC right now. Stanford
Yeah.
having to fly across the country for games. That's what the Big 12's becoming. Big Ten's there too. The only area that would still be regional is SEC. I'll give them that. At least they're all within a region of the United States, even though they're pushing barriers soon too. So new era, Brandon. Just a new era.
That's for sure. One final realignment thing that I heard Drake Toll talk about from Locked On Big 12 is watch out for UTSA being in the mix. I don't know if anybody's stock has gone up more in the last 2 or 3 seasons, just from where they started at. Now they're in the AAC, still having success playing in that championship game last year. It's going to be one of the top dogs in that conference as long as Jeff Traylor's there. But what Drake had brought up was that they are working on some sort of medical school research program that would make them the third largest school in the state of Texas as far as research. And research brings in dollars, which can really speed up the development of a program, especially when you go to a conference like the Big 12 that has Houston, who just took out $10 million of an endowment to pay their bills. So I wouldn't be opposed to adding the Roadrunners into the conference. If we need like another school to like even things out from whatever we get from the ACC, but watch out for the Roadrunners.
That's a very interesting kind of find, Brandon, because it makes sense. I mean, Dallas, Fort Worth, you have TCU that really does a great job of representing that area. State of Texas is pretty well represented in the Big 12. Obviously, Texas Tech out west. Baylor is in between multiple big cities. Houston's been a really nice addition. And yeah, I mean, San Antonio, the big three of Texas is Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and then San Antonio. If you can lock up the three major markets, that's something that the Big 12, I can understand, would be very interested in. And even though they lost that burnt orange team, that doesn't mean that they can't still survive and build a great brand in the state of Texas. And that's what they're doing right now.
All right, but now we're in the football season, and it's so nice because we get to talk about like ball as opposed to administrative stuff like who's gonna what teams are gonna sign where. So I'm super excited about this. So we'll just real quick go team by team. Initial thoughts here. Let me pull up my notes. I got a whole notebook full of notes here for the Big 12. And then as my annual tradition, I went week by week in the conference and picked every single game. And I did something different with the Big 12 this year, and it brought in some interesting results. So we'll go over that here later.
Okay.
But let's get started with the conference as a whole. The only conference with two of the top 5 most experienced teams in the country, Oklahoma State and Iowa State. Exactly like what we thought with the Pac-12 last year, just an incredibly deep roster of elite quarterbacks. Now it's the Big 12 with Noah Fafita. Oh boy, I'm blanking hard.
Well, you have you get Shadur Sanders.
I was trying not to mention him, but I can't
well,
think of
Brandon,
else.
I'm sorry. He is my my fantasy quarterback. Just a reminder.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, just I can't forget him. You have Rocco Beck is obviously a baller with Iowa State. Jalen Daniels at Kansas. I mean, it's just an absolute force. So, I mean, that's just a ground base of all the great quarterbacks in this conference. It is a QB friendly league this year. It kind of feels like the Big 12 from 15 years ago. And and there are other, I mean, transfer QBs are interesting. KJ Jefferson going to Central Florida. That's a big one. Obviously, as an Arkansas fan, that was one that fascinated me as a multi-year all SEC player at Arkansas. And he did kind of fade a little bit last year, but he was a very good QB for multiple years with the Hogs. So, I mean, the Big 12 is famous for QBs. They've had some great ones come through the conference history since even the late 90s, but especially the last 10, 15 years. And you've seen a lot of them succeed at the NFL level. This is a very fun group of quarterbacks in general when you look at the entire conference as a whole. It'll be a lot of fun. The defenses, we'll see if they can catch up or not, but it could feel like old school Big 12 this year where we might see a lot of high scoring games.
Real quick update on North Dakota State. They're 2 plays in and they're in the red zone. So just
How
want to throw
about
that out
that?
there. It's not taking them long to move down the field. So shout out them. I think, and Brett Yormark said this during media days, this is the most important year for the league. And I think that's true for the league as a general optic points. I think it's true for each individual team. As far as the power dynamic and the hole that's been left by Oklahoma leaving the conference, said last year was underwhelming. I'm right there with them outside of an improved Oklahoma team and that Texas team going to their being top 5, their annual their is it quadcentennial tradition where every 25 years they get a good team.
Yep.
They checked that box off.
Yep. Confirmed.
So they had that. But real big stuff, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but with the power vacuum, there's just such an opportunity for so many of these teams to compete, not just this year, but to really kind of take a hold on a power conference that you never get to see.
Yeah. It's huge in terms of viewer habits, too. If the Big 12 puts out a fun product this year, people will watch. If they don't, I mean, habits are going to change this year. Obviously, with the SEC, their main game changing networks, with CBS changing networks, like there is a lot of just newness to college football. 12-team playoff, certain rule changes. People don't even know what various teams are in certain conferences anymore. I mean, it's absolute mayhem. Can the Big 12 find a way to carve out its niche and find an audience? They're going to have their fan base audience in place for all the conference, but can they find new watchers that might go out of their way to say, I'm going to watch this week this Arizona versus Oklahoma State game? Would that be something that interests people? Or Farmageddon with Iowa State, K-State, or the butt rivalry of Baylor versus Texas Tech? Like, can they find those new eyeballs? Can they find the right, TV times, find the right audiences? That's going to be the big question for them. But this is a huge year for the Big 12 and winning non-conference games. We talked about how important it was last year, Brandon. We didn't do very well in non-conference last year, and it really hurt the Big 12 later on in the season. Outside of really Texas was able to kind of shine above. They don't have that luxury anymore, and not having a name brand, teams are going to have to go out of their way to they'll get one team in the college football playoff, but hopefully they can find a way to get a wild card team in too.
Real quick Arkansas-related question. Have they ever had a play where a player was running into the end zone with the football and then dropped it before they got to the goal line? I feel like I've seen that before from Arkansas.
That happened like 15 years ago. I believe it was Joe Adams. I got to remember that. But yes, that happened once. It happened in the Petrino era. The Petrino era. Did it happen again?
It might. They're reviewing it. It's close.
And I just want to make clear, everybody, the offensive coordinator of Arkansas is Bobby Petrino. He must teach his players, hey, do you know what's cool? Chuck the football before you go into the end zone, then get on a motorcycle.
I mean,
grab a cheerleader. It's great.
So it's close because you can tell he's going to toss it, so that motion gets started before he gets to the goal line, but it's still in his hand. That's fascinating. Yeah, that might be a Petrino problem.
That is a Petrino problem. That happened. No, that happened the Petrino era. I do remember
they just
that.
Reversed it. It's they blew it.
Well, there's going to be a lot of stadium stairs that are about to be run for that guy. You just know, like, I mean, I thought that trend was done. I felt like that was a trend that was finally done after like a 5-year stretch where guys were doing that in the NFL and college. I haven't really seen that one in a couple of years.
It's unbelievable that's happened. I think it happened a couple of times last year. It's unbelievable that like it's happened more than once. Because I feel like when it happens once, everybody can point to that. Be like, hey, look how stupid this looks.
Right.
And that should solve it. But no, I guess not. Unbelievable.
That's Arkansas football. And I'll tell you what, Brandon, that'll be an interesting week 2 game, Arkansas versus Oklahoma State. That's a
Yeah, no
significant
kidding.
game for both teams for very different reasons. I mean, for Arkansas, it's saving a coach's job, and for Oklahoma State, it could be a springboard to a really nice season.
That's right. But so we'll go down team by team. Utah, the notes I have from them, they're probably the most popular favorite like contender pick in the league. Defense brings back 9 starters, and then of course Cam Rising comes back from his injury. And even their offense, strong units, but was really downgraded because of that quarterback injury last year.
Yeah, the Utah, I mean, you'd mentioned them being a conference favorite. They've talked a lot of trash, at least their fan base has. Their team has stayed pretty humble throughout the offseason. They're saying the right things. The question is, can they go out and produce a nice season? They've got a schedule, I think, that is favorable to them. They have a couple of tough games, middle of the season. They have an interesting game against Iowa State at home, I think, late November. But this is, for them, they've got to be feeling they've got to make a Big 12 championship game appearance. The table's set for them to do that. So whether they can execute that or not remains to be seen. But boy, definitely the stars align pretty well for them.
Then down the list, Kansas State. It's officially the Avery Johnson show now. Will Howard's now at Ohio State, which I think goes to show just how what they think of Avery Johnson is that they had a quarterback who's now the QB1 at Ohio State, and they were like, we'd rather roll with this guy for the next few years. They bring back DJ Giddens, Colorado transfer, Dylan Edwards transferred in as well. So the running game is going to be probably the one of the better rushing attacks in the country from a quarterback and RB1 and RB2 standpoints. It's real front heavy, their schedule. So if they can survive for a little while, then they're going to be in real good shape. I really like Kansas State.
Tough not to. They kind of similar situation as Utah. They have a schedule that's relatively clean, but they do have, I think, a few more tough opponents. You mentioned all the returners, Brandon. But when I look at their schedule in general, I mean, they have to go to Tulane. They have Arizona at home, Oklahoma State at home, Kansas at home, and Cincinnati at home. And that's a fun home schedule. Interesting road game against Iowa State to end the season. Also, Colorado is an interesting game just to see how they play out in Boulder. But for K-State, what an opportunity. For me personally, Brandon, I'm keeping those are the two teams I'm keeping maybe my biggest eyes on in terms of making it all the way up to North Texas for a conference championship game in December as those two teams. Not that there aren't plenty of contenders, but it wouldn't shock me at all if that's the matchup.
Some more news. Unfortunately, Travis Hunter is still unbelievable at football, so that's a problem.
Good. I mean, that's good for my fantasy team, Brandon.
That's very good for your fantasy.
I mean, there's a reason I picked him, much to your chagrin. I kind of do want to win. Yeah.
Up next, we got Oklahoma State, the most experienced team in the country. They bring back the most production. Had a good run to the Big 12 title game last year somehow. It was a weird team. They get blown out by South Alabama. They get blown out by Central Florida, but they beat Oklahoma and make it to the Big 12 championship game. What a year. But I think out of all the teams that we've talked about so far, they have the highest floor. I don't see a scenario where they're really bad in any way, shape, or form. They bring back a lot of production on defense, of course. Colin Oliver, Nick Martin, big elite linebackers. And they play Utah and Kansas State back-to-back in September. So, again, very front-loaded schedule. So, if they can just survive September, they're going to be in really good shape. Of course, they don't play Oklahoma this year. But they could absolutely be making a trip back to Arlington.
And I hate their game this Saturday. They got to play South Dakota State, who, is the FCS champion. They are extremely well coached in Brookings. They're a tough group. They're only 10-point favorites in that game, Brandon. That is a tough week one matchup for the Cowboys. That's a game I am keeping an eye on because that will be, I think, trickier than maybe people nationally realize. Yes, they have a lot of returning guys, but so does South Dakota State. So it will be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. But it's front loaded. And you're right, Brandon. Can they find a way to get it? If they can get off to a better start than last year, there's no reason why they can't make it back either. I don't know if they can or not. You have Arkansas thrown in. I just mentioned that just a few minutes ago. That'll be a big non-conference game in Stillwater next week. So survive September, and you could be rolling into December. But a lot of work to be done for the Cowboys.
And that brings us to the Cyclones of Iowa State. Probably the number one team I was most wrong about last year. I didn't think they'd win a single Big 12 game, and they were really in the thick. They were in the driver's seat to go to the Big 12 championship game before that weird loss to Kansas. We talked about experience with Oklahoma State. Same exact thing with Iowa State. A very young team last year, so they should be a little bit more experienced. They had 26 points per game last year. They could definitely take a significant step up in that area. So a lot of high-end production. And it kind of doesn't seem like they're getting some of the love that like Utah and Kansas State and Oklahoma State are, which I feel like is exactly where Matt Campbell likes to be.
Yep, I mean they're a dark horse. Obviously, know the team extremely well. What their skill positions are great. Brandon, QB play is great. O line's going to be improved. We'll see how much of a step they take. But you look at all the returning starters, 18 total, 9 on offense, 9 on defense. What can Iowa State do? I think to begin the season, and they got a very winnable game week 1 against North Dakota. Week 2 games, they were big last year for the Big 12, and we just failed, Brandon. We just did not win
Tough
enough
spot.
non-conference games last year to really build momentum that was needed for the rest of the season. Iowa State's got a good opportunity in Iowa to go beat that team out there. Whether they can or not, that remains to be seen, but that should be a very tight game, and I think win that game, avoid the potholes of various conference teams and other teams. This is a team that could be between 8 and 10 wins. There's no reason not. And they are my dark horse to go to the Big 12 championship. I'm not going to be bold enough to say they'll make it because it is Iowa State, but I mean, it's up for grabs this year, Brandon. For any team in the Big 12, that's my big message this week. It's up for grabs. If you want it, go get it.
Real quick, Colorado. It's so cool to see them back with the Big 12 logo. I don't like them in a lot of ways, but I like them back in the Big 12. So if there's a silver lining to the way that this game's shaping up so far, it's good news for the Big 12. So very cool to see that Big 12 logo back on their jerseys, helmets, and the fields. That's cool.
Can't complain, Brandon. It's nice to just see that vintage X with 2 little eyes on it. The Roman numeral for 12
That's
for
right.
those who don't know out there. That's what it means. We don't teach that in schools anymore, Brandon. We're struggling.
It's tough, but
Tough world out there. People need to know their numbers.
that's right. Up next, we got Arizona, 14-time Big 12 champion. I declared that if they beat Oklahoma in the bowl game, that they should inherit their Big 12 championships. So 14-time Big 12 champion Arizona. Noah Fafita is a superstar. I mean, it's unbelievable, and he's got McMillan coming back. Could be the best quarterback wide receiver duo in the entire country. It makes me a bit nervous that they have a new head coach in Brett Brennan, but I think it says a lot that he was able to retain as much talent as he did, especially when they lost Jed Fish. That was real late in the cycle. That's a real tough spot. That's when teams go from Midnight Mel in Colorado to eventually being the worst team in college football. So that's a real tough spot for them. But it seems like that they're not going to take a huge step back.
On paper, they're not. Whether they do or not in terms of coaching, that remains to be seen. I think they have a good staff in place. I don't think I'm going to rip the staff at all. Keeping your quarterback around was huge. I think
Huge.
that changes the whole outlook of the season. You lose him to the transfer portal and somebody else picks him up. Things are looking grim in Tucson, but they keep him. I think that helps keep the team together. I think that helps the coaching staff make that adjustment as well that, hey, this kid wants to stay at Arizona. He wants to help us build this program and keep this program rolling like it was last year. This team is quality. They're tough. They're well coached. Can they adjust to the Big 12 style of play? That remains to be seen. But why not? Pac 12 last year was very competitive. So I think they'll be just fine.
West Virginia. Oh my gosh, what a weird spot West Virginia's in. So they go 9-4 last year. Again, a team I was very wrong about. I thought this was going to be the last year for Neil Brown, and shout out to him for locking in the extension because the schedule's brutal for him this year. Um, I mean, like they could be just as good as they were last year and lose 3 more games. Their
Yep.
schedule, they got no favors. Um, there's even a point where like they were making a run towards the Big 12 title game if they don't give up that weird Hail Mary to Houston. They're
Yep.
right in the thick of it. I mean, if they don't give that up, they win 10 games, Drew
That's a
Russell.
10 win. That's a 10-win team, and that really was the most bizarre ending of maybe any college football game last year. Was that one because they scored touchdown less than 15 seconds left. Looked like game over. They found a way to survive a upset attempt, and then Houston just shucks it into the end zone, cheap seats, and they find a way to win. You're right.
Unreal.
Kind of crazy though that was the difference between a 9-10 win season and for West Virginia. I mean, Neil Brown earned his right to come back and coach. What a chance week 1 to bring Penn State into Morgantown, and they are underdogs at home, but that's gonna be an old school Morgantown atmosphere. I haven't seen Morgantown go hyper nuts for a college football game in a few years. It will get going, I guarantee, on Saturday night. Whether they can find a way to upset, I don't know, but Morgantown's different on Saturdays, Brandon Shanahan.
No doubt about it. TCU, this was one of my surprising teams, and we'll go over like my final standings here in a little bit. But this was the team where I looked up and I was like, holy shit, that's not the number I would have expected them to have. Uh, but they bring in year 2 under Kendall Briles. Their offense took a huge step back last year. It seems like they had their guy in Josh Hoover. They were happy and willing to let Chandler Morris go. So shout out to Chandler Morris at UNT now. They don't have a great runway. They got 11 Power 4 teams on the schedule. That now that they play SMU and Stanford out of conference. No other team in the country does that. But they bring in former Boise State head coach Andy Knowles. He's going to bring their defense back to a 4-3 front, which is going to set them up to succeed a little bit more because their defense was also atrocious last year.
Mm-hmm.
So they should be better than 23. Obviously, not as good as 22, but I think last year we saw what their floor could be, and like the worst case scenario under Sonny Dykes. I think this year we'll get back to more of the median.
And they're going to have to get back to the medium because if they have a similar season to last year, Brandon, then there are
That's
going to be,
tough.
unfortunately, some questions that start in Fort Worth, or maybe not heavy questions, but some light questions is what we'll say, which is crazy because Sonny Dykes had a dream season year 1. I mean, as good as you can
Unbelievable.
ask for. I mean, it was unexpected. It was amazing, and they're going to give them the proper work. But looking at their schedule, Brandon, I mean, they start at Stanford tomorrow on Friday night, tomorrow night, and then kind of an easy game against Long Island University week 2, UCF week 3. Then they start going on the road. They're at Kansas this year. They're at Utah this year. That's 2 very difficult road games where they're going to be underdogs in that. Texas Tech's not an easy game at home. Oklahoma State and Arizona aren't easy games at home. So TCU will have some chances to pick up some big wins, but if they can't, especially those home games, Brandon, if they can't defend home field, and let's say they go 1-2 against those 3 teams, I mean, they might have a similar mark as last season where they're hovering around 500.
Tough spot to be in. This
Yeah.
is the team that I've seen a lot of juice for recently. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 has Kansas in his Big 12 championship game. I don't buy into them whatsoever this year. I hate to be the guy that's like, oh well, Jalen Daniels has made it glass. If he gets hurt, this team collapses, which is mostly true for everybody. So I hate leaning into that, but also like to project him to have a full season without missing games is projecting them to do something that they've never done, that Jalen Daniels never done. So I think that that's fair territory, especially the way that he plays. I look at Cam Rising, who was just out last year with a knee injury, and I'm not putting that tag on him because of the style that he plays and the nature of his injury history. So I also think it's very significant that they're not going to have a home field advantage this year. I mean,
Yep.
I'm not buying that at all. I mean, like games like Iowa State, there could be more Iowa State fans in Arrowhead than the Kansas fans, and I think that's going to be a common trend. So I'm not buying them whatsoever.
The most fascinating thing to me for Kansas this season isn't even the team itself, it's where they're playing their home games. I think that'll be, they don't have a true home this season, Brandon. They're doing heavy renovations with their football stadium in Lawrence. Non-conference games, they're playing Sporting KC Stadium, Mercy Park. And then their conference games, they're playing at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. And what type of home field advantage do they get in those conference games? Because two opponents I can guarantee are going to travel or will have interest. Colorado will definitely have some of their fans and or just people from around the country that are interested might actually make the trip to Kansas City to see him play at Arrowhead. And Iowa State loves Kansas City. Like that school just goes nuts for them. That could be a neutral site game instead of a home game for Kansas. So can they adapt to not having a true home field this year is going to be my big question. And those are two very nice stadiums. It's not the field conditions or quality that's a problem. I mean, Arrowhead's super
Right.
nice.
Of
So
course.
is Sporting KC Stadium. It's very nice. But no home field advantage or a natural, like, hey, we're playing on our campus. It feels like a game day atmosphere. Fans are going to have to travel almost an hour, about 45, 50 minutes to Arrowhead Stadium or a little less to watch their team play. Will fans do that? I think so, because they're going to be on paper pretty good this year. But can they defend home field without being on campus?
And so I think that's where we draw the line on like teams that, at least consensusly, like I said, I know I'm out on Kansas, but teams that could really compete for a spot in Arlington this year. Up next, it brings up UCF. I think they're gonna have a better team than they did last year. I love KJ Jefferson, of course, Wu Pig Sui, legend. They got a lot of good defenders, and then I'm not gonna bet against Gustavo
Never.
one bit.
Nor should you. I mean, Gustavo's the goat. And UCF, I mean, I was pretty high on UCF last year. I love what they did. Beat Oklahoma State, pretty shocking. Like, just absolutely destroyed them
Unbelievable.
in November last year. Like, it wasn't even close. That was kind of a stunning win. The game that's going to be interesting for them, they've got back-to-back games that I'm fascinated by. Late September, they host Colorado, which if they get a nice warm day, can Colorado handle that humidity and heat in Florida? And the game I'm kind of excited about for them, they go to Florida the next week, Brandon. That'll be a very
That'll be
interesting
very
game in
good.
the
Yeah.
swamp because Florida's kind of going through this identity crisis, which they have been for a lot of years now. They don't know who's going to lead the program. They're desperately trying to bring back old magic, which I don't know if they're going to be fine. All their rivals are extremely good right now, even if Florida State just choked week one, but we won't talk about week zero, excuse me. We won't discuss that though. Um, that's a big game for UCF. And if they can find a way to win that game, Brandon, that feels like maybe some needed legitimacy in the state of Florida and some needed legitimacy or just bonus legitimacy for the Big 12 conference.
Up next, Texas Tech. Where I'm at with Texas Tech is we'll talk in October. Their schedule is very front friendly. They should be 5-0. They've lost back to back or non-conference game in back-to-back years that they probably shouldn't have. Well, okay, last year they played. No, they're the teams that got upset by Wyoming, right?
Yes.
And then they somehow almost beat Oregon. Weird year, but it's also tough because they have not had any type of quarterback consistency, just staying healthy. So if they do that, they'll be back up towards the top half of the conference.
Yeah, I think the big thing for them is they had such big expectations last year, Brandon. I remember you and I think they were a dark horse for me to make the Big 12 championship game last year. I was high on them. They go to Wyoming week one and just play terrible and lose. And that was that's a tough game to start the season, but they still should have won. That was a
Yeah, that
very,
was a
like,
weird
they got to
game.
win that game. They didn't. And that kind of started the season poorly. They kind of adjusted at the end, but it set a tone they didn't need. This year, on the other hand, they're going to get an opportunity to, as you said, kind of get more smooth seas to start the season. And then what can they do in October and November as well? For Coach Joey McGuire, this is a big season. They've had great donations with NIL money, so there is definite interest in West Texas. That's always been a great fan base. I've praised Red Raider fans for a long time. One of my favorite fan bases in the Big 12. So they will support their teams. They deserve, if we're going to have Big 12 after dark, put Lubbock on a
Let's
couple
go.
games. Like, that's the perfect city to have those type of games. It will be interesting though. Can they navigate the smooth seas, and can they find a way to put together quality runs in the more choppy seas and stormy seas, and see if they can find that 8, 9, 10 wins that they didn't find last year but could find this year.
Up next is Baylor. If I'm being completely honest, I'm surprised that Dave Aranda got another go at it. He's now gone from 12 wins to 6 wins to 3 wins. That's not a great trend. But they're all in this year. They got a new offensive coordinator that should help kind of speed things up offensively. They get Daquan Finnan at QB1. That should help. And now Aranda's going back to calling the defense, so that's huge. I think they're the number one team that definitely won't contend, but you won't want to play. You'll have a bad time.
Yeah, and I hate their schedule, Brandon. I'll tell you that right now. You want to hear this? They play Tarleton State this week. That should be a win. Then they're at Utah, Violent. That's a tough week 2 game. And that's a non-conference game, but they put it on the schedule many years ago. Of course, they're conference opponents now, but that's non-conference. Air Force week 3, that's not necessarily a gimme. Then they're at Colorado versus BYU. They're at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU, at West Virginia, and at Houston and Kansas at home for the season.
That's not friendly.
That's not friendly much at all. Like that's a top 3 difficult schedule in the Big 12 this year is for Baylor. And those road games are all pretty violent. I mean, that's a tough road schedule. I'll say this, if they make a bowl game, if they go 6-6, save the job, he earned 1 more year. I'll say that right now. Like, that's a tough schedule if they can find a way to make a bowl game. 6-6 is your target if you're Baylor this year.
So I think when we're talking about the next two, this team and the next team is hope. Can you give me something to be hopeful for? Because definitely nothing hopeful about Baylor's last season. Definitely nothing hopeful about Cincinnati last year. Another team I got burned on. I was real big on Cincinnati. I thought them and UCF would be in the same tier. That wasn't the case at all. Scott Satterfield might be an awful hire, but we'll see. But like you said, just show me something. Get back to a bowl game. If not, it might be a quick run for the Satterfield era.
It could be. And the keys to keep an eye on, honestly, is attendance. What's fan interest? Cincinnati is a very proud program, great fan base as well. Just made the college football playoff just a couple of years ago. I mean, let's not forget that little run that they put together. Yeah, I mean, they had some very poor crowds at the end of the season last year. And if they don't play well this year, they're going to have some poor crowds again at the end of the season. ADs notice this. Donors notice this. Recruits, everybody notices this. You have to have enthusiasm and energy in a program. If a place feels like they have a chance to win, NIL money goes up. If they don't, boosters are going to say, we need somebody else to come in here and give us hope. And I don't know if they're going to find it or not, Brandon. That's going to be, I think, a top 5 storyline for me this season, because Cincinnati, when they came into the conference, in my opinion, was the cream of the crop of the 4 teams that came in last year, just based on previous 5 years of success. Who knows? I really don't know on this program. They're going to have to put it together, and they're going to have to put it together quick. Can they? Of course they can. But if they don't, well, I'm not going to make any predictions right now, but things could be pretty dicey for a coaching staff late November.
Up next is Colorado. Weird. Yeah, I predicted them to go 2-10 last year. They went 4-8, and somehow it feels like I was a mile off. Because it didn't look anything like I thought it would. But they went from horrible to just really bad. They went real deep back into the transfer portal again, which I thought was an interesting move. They had the smallest high school recruiting class I've ever seen, 6 high school recruits. Very interested to see how that goes. I'm told that their offensive line is going to be vastly improved. I was also told that last year, and I guess it was kind of true. So we'll see. But another team. I think their downfall is that they're the team that nobody wants to lose to. They saw how everybody pointed and laughed at TCU and at Nebraska, and I don't think any team wants to be that team. So I think they're going to get everybody's best effort, and I think that's going to inevitably be their downfall here.
Yeah, I mean, they made the headlines the most. Sometimes headlines are unnecessary, but boy, they warranted them this offseason, and a lot of them deserved some criticism at times. Can they find a way to get above the noise? A lot that they just created themselves, not even like, hey, this is noise just to make headlines. Well, they're the ones saying this stuff. You got to back it up now. And that's going to be the big question. I think for this program, Brandon, they got to make a bowl game. I think that's got to be the expectation this year. It's not an easy schedule, but it is a winnable schedule. They're going to draw eyeballs to the conference. That's guaranteed. And that's not a bad thing for the conference. Like, it's good that there are programs like this. We need programs like Colorado. They are necessary to help build and prop up this conference. But they got to win. They got to win. They've talked a little bit too much. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with building yourself up. But now you got to go back it up. And if you don't, people are not going to respect your program. That can hurt stuff in the offseason as well. But who knows? I will say this all over and over for Deion Sanders. No one gave one rip about Colorado before he got there. Now they're one of the most talked about programs in the country nonstop. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but they're talked about. And sometimes that's all a school wants. So in a lot of ways, he's already done his job of drawing interest. But now you guys make sure you find those W's on the field.
BYU got some W's last year. They started 5-2. They lost the last 5, unfortunately, so they missed the bowl game. And it should take a pretty strong step back. But they have a path to a bowl game. Week 2 against SMU is going to probably be the big needle mover for them. If we're talking in political, whereas that's a swing game. Where if you're trying to get to 6, if you're trying to get to 270, you got to get SMU there.
Have to get SMU, and you're right, Brandon. Like, they cannot miss those type of games. You miss on that game, this season could go and get in trouble rather quickly. I think the big thing for this program is taking their time, taking it 1 week at a time, and really just showing their best energy night in, night out. And for BYU, I mean, for them, Wyoming is also an interesting game to me. To go to SMU and then to Wyoming on week 3, Brandon. That's a fascinating back-to-back road games for BYU. If they can navigate that, they got a pretty fair home schedule for Big 12. They can get 7-8 wins. They should make bowl eligible. I'd be very shocked if they didn't make a bowl.
Up next, Arizona State, probably my number one. Like, if you're gonna buy stock in a team, this is definitely when I would put it on the list, just because you're buying low. I'm a believer in Kenny Dillingham. There's a lot of juice within that program. They brought in a couple of quarterbacks, Sam Levitt, who I think is going to develop into kind of that Josh Hoover, Rocco Beck tier, where he's not going to be a first-round draft pick, but he's going to be a really good college football quarterback. They also brought in Jeff Sims from Nebraska, so that's probably not great. Hope you don't have to see him too much. But as long as they look better, they got Marcus Arroyo as their offensive coordinator, so hopefully they can settle into their vision. Defense is going to be thin and inexperienced, but definitely a good rebuilding year here for Arizona State. I like where they're going.
Yeah, and they're building a positive culture. I think that's their number one thing this year. They're going to be playing spoiler in a lot of games, Brandon. If they make a bowl, that's an outstanding season. And I think as long as they're just trending in the right direction, there's nothing wrong with a losing season for this program. I like what they're building. I think the culture is going to be there. The players, obviously, they'd still, they're trying to get more talent in the future, but I think it seems like a group of players that want to play together. They want to play for each other. They want to play for their coaches, vice versa. And that's always a good start. That's a good base ground floor. Whether they find wins or not, I'm not sure, but at least it seems the right pieces are being put into place.
And then last but certainly not least, Houston. Their powder blues are the biggest, probably the best uniforms in college football. Still infuriated that the NFL tried to sue them to block them from wearing those, considering that they let a team in Nashville, Tennessee wear them.
Brutal.
Again, another buy low team. I love Willie Fritz. I think they're going to do a lot of great things. I don't think any of that's going to be this year. They're going to be real bad this year. But again, I like where they're going. This is a team where if they can just build some momentum, build some hope, they could absolutely be in that top half of the Big 12 here in the next few years.
Yeah, and I'll just do a copy and paste of what I just said about Arizona State and apply it to Houston. Willie Fritz is a good coach. He has found success at other programs. Houston got a very good hire. Dana Holgerson just didn't work out, and that was a little bit of a surprise because I thought it was a pretty good hire at the time when they got him from West Virginia. Didn't work out. Fritz is a right guy, Southern guy, loves building good cultures. Again, I'm with you, Brandon. I don't know if I see big wins for Houston this year, a lot of winning, but they were really unwatchable various weeks
Yeah.
last year, like really
Except that
unwatchable.
West Virginia game.
Except the West Virginia game, they played. That was a great game. They were watchable at least for 1 week. They should have just played on Thursdays. They should have
Yeah.
never played
That
Saturdays.
was the key.
Yeah, that was the key for them, I guess. But they're building the right thing. But I'm with you. It's going to take time. Houston, though, is a sleeping giant. I still think if they can find the right, the fan base is getting there. It's still not an all-in on H-Town, but their basketball program has heavy support, Brandon, because it's well ran. Players want to be in Houston. I think football could have that same impact. It's a large city. They've got connections. Again, they've just got to find a way to find that proper channels to build those connections and raise NIL funds and get there.
And so, as I do every year, and it's my favorite thing to do. It's where I learn the most about teams that I don't typically know about. A way to kind of hold myself accountable for some bad takes. I go through week by week and pick every single team for every single Power Five, Power Four team now. And I did that for all four conferences again this year. Big difference with the Big 12 and the Big 10 is typically like I'll keep like a running standings chart as I'm going, mostly just to help keep track. But what I found when I was doing like the ACC and the SEC is that I was kind of influencing how I was picking games from a standpoint of, well, like I had North Carolina at 9-1 at some point, which just felt ridiculous. But they got a
Yep.
lot of 50-50 games. A lot of those are at home. Um, but I was like, okay, well, I don't think that they're going to go 11-1. So now I got to pick them to get upset here in these. And it just felt not what the exercise is supposed to be. So for the Big 12, I didn't follow any standings. Just like I'm looking at each individual that matchup in a vacuum, and I got some pretty interesting numbers out of it. Let me pull up
Let's
my
see these.
screen here. I'm excited to share these here with you. Um, Most notably, and I didn't do conference record for a lot of these teams because we don't need to know what
Yeah.
Houston did in conference. Um,
Ooh.
but bottom line in Arlington, Kansas State and Utah, with Kansas State going 12-0. I like them in every single matchup that they have. And then Utah 11-1. The only loss is that matchup against Kansas State, which I don't know if I would have predicted either of those two. Because I really don't want Utah to be good. I'm not having uh, fond feelings of their fans and the way that they view the Big 12 conference. But credit where credit's due. They got a lot of winnable games. Oklahoma State 10-2. Their two losses are to Kansas State and Utah. Another one that I didn't exactly have near on my radar, and I was teasing this earlier, TCU at 10 and
Mm-hmm.
2. That again, that if I was doing the standings, they would not have finished 10 and 2. But I like their individual matchups. They played some of their tougher conference games at home. Some of those 50-50 games. So they ended up with 10 wins, and then Iowa State also getting that a monkey off their back that Iowa fans love to remind them of. It's the fact that they've never won 10 games. Again, the Iowa's going to be the big swing game here, but they got a lot of winnable games on the docket this year.
They do. That's an interesting list, Brandon. I mean, 12-0 for Kansas State would be. I'll say this right now: if any team goes 12-0, they lose in the conference championship game, they're getting the college football playoff. Like, so there you go. There's a barometer right there for any team in the conference. Go 12-0, you're in. I don't care. Like, there's no way they're going to keep you out. I think, if it played out like that, 3 10-2 teams would be very interesting in the conference
Yeah.
because do any of them make the college football playoff? How would they view that if none of them make a conference championship game, but they all like a 10-win team? How do they view the Big 12 compared to the Big 10 and the SEC? What will be those parameters? And that's why it's so important for weeks 1 through 3 through 4 and various non-conference games. Big 12 has to find a way to win these or the majority of them just to build respect within the league. They weren't able to do that last year. They just got fortunate that Texas played extremely well, and Texas is a national brand. We don't have that national brand right now. So how do they overcome that and all that? But that's a great list, Brandon. That's very interesting.
Yeah, this is the path to the Big 12 kind of maximizing their teams because, like you said, no matter what happens in Arlington, probably best case scenario is Utah wins that game because they're not leaving out a 12-1 Kansas State team. Then you're looking at it like so you got Utah at the 4 seed, you got Kansas State probably in the single digits. Then you look at Oklahoma State, whose only 2 losses are to those top 10 teams. Is that a way where they sneak in where a Big Ten team has a lesser loss than either of those two teams? So that's the path there. But we got to get there 1 week at a time, and so we're ready for our pick'em. So you can see our season totals last year. I kept up with you for a while, and then you pulled away late.
Hmm.
So shout out to Drew Russell. But we're adding a little wrinkle here this year. We're also ranking these games 1 to 13, and so we're going to keep a confidence point total as well. So we'll see, gross records, and then we'll also see how you facilitate that. I am taking 3 games off the board since we're already close to halftime in 3 of these games.
Yep.
UCF up on New Hampshire, Colorado, and a bare knuckle brawl with North Dakota State, and then Kansas was only up 7-0 on Lindenwood. They're a huge favorite. They're unbelievable. But we'll get things started here. I'll go ahead and get it started with my 10-point game, Utah over Southern Utah. Give me the Utes here to win big. So 1 through 13 here.
Yeah, I've got Utah as well, Brandon. And I'll tell you what, I'm just not going to mess around. I'm just going to say 13. Let's just give me 13 for Utah. Let's keep that simple. That's how much I believe. I just won't even mess around. I think they have a good opportunity.
And then Penn State, the only ranked team in the FBS that are going to be facing a Big 12 team. So I'm going to take Penn State, and just because of some of the other matchups, I'm just going to give them a 1 point. But I think I do feel more confident about that.
Yeah, I'm going to take Penn State as well, and I'm going to go 2 points is what I'll go with. Not an easy matchup, though, because West Virginia, Morgantown's going to be going. Those players are going to be on an emotional high. It'll just come down to execution in the second half, but I guarantee West Virginia will hang in there in the first half just because it's sheer emotion.
Up next, probably the next game on this docket that I'm least confident in, and that's Oklahoma State and South Dakota State. I can't imagine a world where in back-to-back years Oklahoma State drops a game like this. South Dakota State's gonna give them a good battle, but give me Oklahoma State with 2 points.
Yeah, that's funny, Brandon. I'm going to take Oklahoma State as well, and I'm going 1 point. I just do not like this matchup. South Dakota State can beat them. I know they can. I mean, they're good, but Oklahoma State also is a great team too. But boy, so many teams, not just the Big 12, but in other conferences too, have picked a top 3, top 5 FCS schools, and those FCS schools come in and win, or at very least compete well. So Oklahoma State, I think, aware of the situation, but they cannot mess around.
Up next, we got Cincinnati and Towson. I'm going to go Cincinnati 3 points here, mostly just because of the fact that we learned last night as we unveiled this new pick-up model on Cornerstone Connection is it's also tricky to keep track of your numbers. So I'm going to try to keep it as clean as I can moving forward. So Cincinnati 3 points.
Yeah, and I'm going to do Cincinnati as well. Give me 5 points. Feeling good about the Bearcats. I think they can do it.
Let's see here. Iowa State, North Dakota. Not North Dakota State. Still a good ball club in the FCS, but give me Iowa State, and then give me. Let's see. We got 13. Give me 12. I really feel good about where they're at there. So give me the Clones.
Yeah, Iowa State sometimes has struggled in these games historically. I don't think that'll be the case here. I'll do Iowa State as well, Brandon, and I'll do 10. All
right. Up next, Baylor and Tarleton State. We're not a Tarleton State's podcast, so give me the Bears. They need this one. Otherwise, Aranda might not make it until Halloween. But give me them. Give me 4 points.
Yeah, this was a game that was a bit of an issue last year for Baylor. I don't love it just because of their struggles there. I got Baylor too, and I was actually thinking the exact same thing. I'm going Brett Favre 4.
There we go. UNLV in Houston. Boy, if there's going to be a Big 12 team along the rest of the way that slips up, it might be Houston.
Yeah.
But give me Houston and 5 points.
Yep, same. I don't love this matchup for Houston, but rep Big 12 this week. Houston 3.
Let's see. Up next, Kansas State and UT Martin. Give me the Cats, and then I'll use my 13-pointer here for the Wildcats. Especially for what I just said about them going 12-0. You got to start with this one.
Hey, you mentioned 12-0, Brandon. I like that number, so let's just use 12. I'll take Kansas State as well. You sold me, Brandon. I don't know if they're going 12-0, but I got confidence this week.
Abilene Christian and Texas Tech. Give me the Raiders. Let's see what points do I have left. Give me 9 points. I like the Raiders in the spot here, and I think now that you have 2 years of dropping a non-conference game that you shouldn't have, this is one that you look at and you think, hey, let's take care of business. Let's not mess around.
No, I think for Texas Tech, not an easy game, but a game that they should win. I think I'm with you. I think they take care of business well. I'll take Texas Tech, and give me an 8. I'll take an 8-pointer.
Southern Illinois and BYU. Again, I'm extremely confident. I'm very down on the Cougars, but I think this is going to be their best opportunity to pick up a sure win. But give me them. What's the lowest number I have left? 6. Give me a 6.
Yep, I'll do BYU 7. Yeah, I mean, it's a winnable game, but Southern Illinois had a good year last year in the FCS, so that's something to underrated effort. Team out of the Missouri Valley.
Arizona and New Mexico. I'm down to 2 numbers, so I think it's just 7 and 8. That's right. So give me the 8 here for Arizona.
Yeah, and I'm going to take Arizona as well. I'm going to take, let's see what I got. I still got to do 11, so I'm going to do an 11 for Arizona. And I think we missed one, Brent. I think we still have TCU and Stanford. I think we missed one up top.
That's
so I think
right.
we have 2 numbers left. I think we each have 2 numbers left.
That's absolutely right.
So we'll get that word ironed out correctly.
Good call. Good catch there.
Yeah.
So I got 9.
This came an unexpected little wrinkle though. Now we got potentially, I mean, that's kind of more of an interesting pick game, TCU Stanford.
Well, and especially as you look at it, like we got almost all. We do have all the same picks, so this confidence factor is huge. I love it.
It is. It's a good wrinkle this year.
So let's see what numbers are I left. I know I don't got 9. So I got 6, 7.
Yep, I got 9 and 6 left.
Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I got 7, 8, 9, 10. So I got 11 and 7. Give me Arizona State for 11. No. Give me them from 7.
Okay. I'm going to take Arizona State as well. I'm going to take them for 9.
9. And then up top, I'm going to count on the Horned Frogs bouncing back. This is a big one. Oddly enough, I'm very much ingrained on TCU Twitter. A lot more Stanford burner accounts than I expected. But
that's shocking. I thought they were saving lives. I thought they were saving lives at med school or enriching the future tomorrow. I didn't realize they were just at home with cookie crumbs on their stomach, just trolling.
You'd be surprised.
Like the rest of America. I don't like this matchup necessarily for TCU, but Stanford just has no juice in their football program right now. So I'm going to take TCU as well. And I've got 6 remaining. So yeah, the confidence factor is fascinating because like if one of these teams slips up, who's going to lose more points? Like
That's right.
It's kind of a fun wrinkle this season. I love it, Brandon Shanahan.
I love it too. It's a lot more number management, but I think we'll pick it up as we go on.
Got to have your business. Got to have your transactions.
That's right. And if we were picking the top 3 games, again, those games are already approaching halftime. In hindsight, I probably should have led off with this, but it didn't feel natural to lead off with Pick'em. But I would have taken Colorado, UCF, and Kansas. Probably not a high number for Colorado, but high numbers for UCF and Kansas for sure.
Yep, I would agree with that. But Colorado's going to be in a dogfight, though. I mean, they'll score, but I'm not kidding. That North Dakota State team usually can play.
They're trailing 17-14.
Yep, I know. I'm aware. I'm keep an eye. But shout out to UCF. They're off to a great start in Lindenwood. They're trying to hang in there with Kansas, but Kansas got 2 touchdown lead.
Okay, so they're starting to pull away because Kansas was a great 45.5-point favorite.
Well, they got work to do, but they'll find a way.
For all you
gambling sickos out there, I bet they find a way.
And Colorado got stuffed on 4th down. We're so back. We're so back to Russell. I'm so happy college football is back.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm so excited to have hate watching back, which is exactly what we're about to do here with Colorado. Any final thoughts on this glorious first weekend of college football?
This country needs to hate watch more. It is fantastic to have college football back. What an interesting season. What an interesting season, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to feel completely different, but once those traditions come back, once that football's played, it'll feel like old times. So enjoy it. Be happy we got football all the way through February.